To build a house, the amount of work you have to go through and all the channels of communication, it's just a mess. So I think it's high time that our allies start paying their fair share.
We as a people feel like we are aligned with how our tax dollars, our hard-earned income, are we aligned with the government with how that's being spent? I think most Americans would say military defense spending, and I work in the defense industry, right? They say it's on par.
You know, when you're young, you should be highly leveraged. You should have a lot of debt. That's what a lot of financial advisors suggest, is that you're not taking enough risk by not having enough debt. People who tend to take on educational debt thinking they'll pay off later in life, right?
What's the government that we want to have, and what does that need to look like moving forward in the future? I agree. Hey, there's waste in the government. How do we manage and cut that out? That's true. So what's the vision of where it is that we're trying to get to, and then we kind of work our way backward?
Welcome to episode 10 of the World Wave Podcast. My name is Caleb Solomon, co-founder of Jara Capital, and I'm here with Toyyib. How's it going, brother?
I'm doing all right, brother. It's good to have you back on the pod. You was not here with us last time. You was on vacation, but that is all right. Okay, it's good to have you back on.
2 weeks ago, obviously, I went to DC to celebrate my birthday, and the other week I was not feeling well. My throat had an issue, but I'm glad that I'm feeling better. And I'm off to the races, so...
there we go, and welcome back.
Putting it down. Yeah, appreciate it. And obviously, we have our August guest with us today. Raymond was here with us, I think, 2 parts ago. How's it going, Raymond? How's life? How's family?
Yeah, life's full. Family's all right. It's good. My mom had a birthday this month. Had a good Valentine's as well. So all is good. And, work is full. Yeah. Can't ask for a different life. Can't complain.
Fantastic. And we have a newer guest with us today, one of our besties, I call him, Janoye Williams. Before I let him, give us a quick synopsis of how life is going in family, I'd like to share a quick bio of himself. So Janoye Williams is a seasoned supply chain and operations leader with over 10 years of experience at Pratt & Whitney, where he's held key roles in procurement, quality, materials management, commodity management, and delivery assurance. And currently, he's serving as the GTF MRO Network Planning and Performance Associate Director, where he plays a critical role in optimizing schedules, mitigating risk, and driving strategic initiatives to enhance capacity and turnaround time across the MRO network. So very heavily strong experience in the end-to-end supply chain. Previously, he served as a North American Sales and Customer Experience Senior Manager in the aftermarket operations, where he led a $1.2 billion component repair sales strategy, implemented customer service best practices, and negotiated major agreements, including 500 million parts repair renewal. His expertise spans supply chain strategy, aftermarket sales, and operational excellence. He has a BS in supply chain, BS meaning Bachelor's of Science, not literal BS, in supply chain and information systems from Penn State University, and a master's in financial risk management, and an MBA from the University of Connecticut. And I think that is where Janoye actually met Toyyib, if I'm not wrong. He's very passionate about mentorship, community engagement. He co-founded the Janoye app, which is thriving, and he's a recognized leader who has received multiple honors, including 100 Men of Color Award and Hartford's Finance Award. I could keep going on and on. Like you have a huge depth and breadth of experience and expertise. So how is it going with you? How is family? How is life? Before we jump in,
first of all, appreciate the opportunity to join you good folks on this podcast. Raymond, very nice to meet you. Life is good. Life is busy. It's been a busy couple months. It's been interesting in the aviation world. Hope you can dive into that a little bit. But family's good. A little bit of traveling. Just got back from Paris a week ago. But yeah, life is good. No complaints on this end.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot, and I hope that things good. Yeah, you're totally doing well. I think last week you traveled overseas to do some business. So You're very, very busy.
Janoye is a man on the road. I want to be like him when I grow up. You know, that's my goal.
It's tough when you have two little ones and a wife at home.
Yes.
You know, but it's we're blessed. I'm blessed to be in this position. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, without much further ado, we want to jump in. We have a very packed agenda for our audience today, and the theme for the topic is going to be centered around macroeconomics. We'll delve into what is going on in the economy today. We'll delve into real estate, and then we'll end with sports. So, in terms of the segment one of the topic, obviously, there's been lots going on in the federal government today. There's been a new administration coming in, and I wanted to highlight some key topics. And I'm hoping that Kwaku can share those articles during the presentation. But I wanted to highlight some few things happening in the economy today. There's an article that came up in the AP which says that thousands of federal employees have been shown the door in the first month of the Trump administration, and scrolling through that article is basically across all federal agencies, whether Veteran Affairs, Defense Department, the Education Department, Energy. Basically, the theme of right-sizing the government seems to be what the new administration is trying to execute. So, with that, I wanted to get your thoughts about about the current firing so far, or they call downsizing or right-sizing of the government. Is it the right time to be executing this? And also, what is the role of the executive branch? Because there's lots of debate about whether the president or a president has a right to fire, employees. So maybe let's start with our newest guest on the show, Janoye. I'll pass the ball to you to kick it off.
Yeah, I mean, very, very interesting developments since the Trump administration from January. A lot of quick, decisive actions. I think the intent is clear from the administration, right? I think leading up to the inauguration, Trump was very vocal about where we had, let's say, dead bodies in America, right? Where the dead bodies are hidden, right? And obviously, debt remains a huge focus. How we're exposed in the global environment remains a huge focus. So it's interesting to see how quickly we've looked internally and looked in the mirror and looked at some of the agencies that we're currently funding. And honestly, I think the intention it comes from a good place. I know that's probably a controversial thing to say, and I know there's a lot of talk about how deeply should the executive branch be involved in some of the firing, some of the right sizing of the government. But ultimately, if I put it plainly, there's a lot of waste. I mean, I think Trump is going to run the country like a business, and every so often a business has to look at their processes. They got to look at the resources and say, do I have the adequate resources to support the country? Unfortunately, it impacts a lot of folks who has had a livelihood and some sort of seniorship with the government in their federal jobs, but ultimately we've got to make sure that we're spending taxpayers' dollars correctly. I mean, that's what it comes down to. I know there's a lofty goal by Mr. Musk to try to find $1 trillion in cost savings. That's going to be interesting to see where that's coming from. It's interesting to see how and where the government is funded, and I think this is the first time I've seen a little bit more visibility. Like, we've kind of peeled back the doors and we're getting kind of let into where the government money is being spent. I think that's very different for the American people to have that level of visibility, and I think it's made some people feel uncomfortable, especially if you have a federal job. But I say all that to say, we're still a country that needs resources. We still need agencies. We still need the support. It's interesting to see how these decisions are being made and how we're deciding to right-size what parts of the government. But yeah, that's my take. I think it comes with good intention, but over time, I think we'll start to see how the overall impact of right-sizing and having less resources impacts the everyday lives of Americans today.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting point about talking about running the country as a business. There's a huge debate about that. Is the government a non-profit agency, or should it be run as as a profitable agency? It's lots of discussions around that, and in respect to the savings, $2 trillion of potential savings, and he backed down to $1 trillion of savings, which Max lofty goal is. It's going to be interesting to see how that happens. But before I pass the ball to Toyyib, I want to give a quick civic lesson as to how the executive government works. So obviously we know that we have three branches of government. We have the legislature, we have the judiciary, and we have the executive. And in terms of the total amount of employees in the federal government today is roughly 10 million employees. So 2.5 million employees in civil servants roles, 2.5 million in the military roles, and roughly 5 million contractors and subcontractors today. And these employees, they manage about $6.5 trillion in terms of budget. The government pulls in or revenue via taxes and other tariffs is roughly $4.5 trillion. So that leaves us a deficit of $2 trillion. So we spend $6.5 trillion, we bring in 4.5, so the delta is $2 trillion, which we need to finance every year through the bond market.
Okay.
The president is elected. He has about 4,000, jobs that he needs to fill. 1,000 of those the employee has to go through this the HR department, that I call the Senate, advice and consent, and 3,000 can hit the deck day one after they pass their background check and also their security clearance. So after all that is done, there's a theory around. It's called the unified theory of the executive, which is pretty much in three concepts. Is this? The president is the chief executive officer of the government. Number two, he's a commander in chief of the armed forces. And number three, he's a chief magistrate and the chief law enforcement officer, which obviously is a huge debate about that. Does the DOJ need to work underneath the president, or does it have to be an independent agency that is working on crime and other stuff? So with this context in place, as the president being the chief executive officer, there's huge debate about why is he laying off people? Why is he right-sizing the government? So, Toyyib, from your perspective, is it callous for the chief executive officer of the government to fire people? Because it's happening in the private sector. I mean, the private sector, Google, remember during the pre-pandemic, we were hiring like crazy. And then obviously the time came where they were like, listen, we have to trim the fat, and then obviously there was massive layoffs. So do civil servants deserve the opportunity to have a lifetime appointment, like work there for 30, 40 years? Or like, what is the right way to go about right-sizing the government?
Yeah, and I think Janoye, you first of all, obviously, Caleb, that's a great question, and you've touched upon a couple of things that I certainly agree there, which is right the intent that we need to manage the government resources properly. I think we all agree with that, right? Like, what's the role of the government? What's the government that we want to have, and what does that need to look like moving forward in the future? I agree. There's waste in the government. How do we manage and cut that out? That's true. But I think at the same time, what's the vision for me? I start a lot of things like, what's the vision of where it is that we're trying to get to, and then we kind of work our way backwards. Where it seemed like over the last, I guess, call it a month and a half, or if we've been a month now, it's like, let's make this quick decisions, let's be very decisive, let's make all these cuts without necessarily knowing what the true impact is, I think, down the line. And I think that's kind of been my area of concern right now. Absolutely, I don't think in the government or as an employee you should have a lifetime contract forever, underperform. No, we all have to perform. But at the same time, I don't also think the government should also try and be a business as well. I mean, the private sector versus what the role of the government is, I think also two different things personally. So we should be very strategic in the roles that are being eliminated. But that doesn't just mean, we should shut off a whole agency department, without necessarily doing our research on, what's their role? How do we think about that function moving forward? So, certainly there's a lot of, and that's what I'm saying, there's a lot of debates on like, what is the government we want to have? And then let's work backwards to meet that. So no, I don't think you should have lifetime employment, but the process in which you go about cutting those jobs and where those functions need to reside as you move forward also needs to be calculated and thought of as well. And I'm not sure how much of that really we're doing these days. And oftentimes people from the private sector, it's in the private sector, we're focused primarily on income, right? Like, how do I grow my earnings, right? It's all about the money. I don't think the government's role should just be about that as well, though, right? It has to have a different role, and it should fund certain things that's not doesn't really have healthy ROI. So, lots of debates there, but like my goal is, my ultimate point is, let's start with the vision of what the government needs to be first, and then you be strategic about the roles that you eliminate. And no, I do not think the U.S. government should be run like a business where it's just focused on the bottom line. I do not agree with that at all. So, Ray, I'll pass it to you. Your thoughts?
No, I wanted to let Janoye respond to that, because that was Janoye's comment. So, and I'll pass it on to him.
Yeah, I mean,
what are your thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
Janoye, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, I agree. Government shouldn't be run like a business, but it's the reality we live in, right? You got to also remember there's context and perspective to this. Like, there's an optical, like, hey, passing of the torch, the Biden administration to the Trump administration. There's this element of, like, I got to clean this stuff up, right? Make America great again, right? It means that we're not in a great position to begin with. We got to get back to being great, right? So I think the vision is probably not clear, but the intention has always been the country wasn't being run right to begin with, right? And if you think about where we stand, right, I think a lot of focus has been on, like, what is the U.S. debt exposure to the world right now, right? There's been a lot of talk about that. There's been a lot of focus on cost cutting, right? Getting the debt to a manageable place. Some of this, I agree. Like, we've got to get to the place where that we can, decide our fate with the government. We, the people, ultimately, we decide what the government should look like. But ultimately, like, we're on a seesaw journey right now, right? We're on, like, one end on the spectrum and on the other end of the spectrum, right? And each administration is cleaning up what the last administration have done. But I'll leave it at that. I personally don't think the country should be run like a business. But I also recognize that there's some context and perspective here. Like, there is some cleanup that this administration is going to do. We've been doing this probably for the last 3 or 4 administrations, right? Since kind of President Obama felt like he had to clean up what George Bush did. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's my thoughts on that.
And I'm sure Ray wants to get in, but just one point when I say that, just around the business, I do agree you can apply some business principles to the government, but I don't necessarily think the government should mirror the way I might go run Google, if that's clear. So, yeah. Go ahead, Caleb.
Yeah, and again, I think you guys make some good points. But at the end of the day, the United States government is $36 trillion in debt. I think it was forecasted that, like, within the next 3 months will be the interest payments on the debt will be close to $1 trillion. That's the size of the DoD. So with this context in mind, Ray, I mean, listen, America is in a hard place where we need to solve the debt. It's not going to be pretty, and I guess the question to you, Ray, is, like, what is the right way to do it in the because there's no compassionate way to fire somebody. Like, trust me, I've been fired multiple times, and they didn't say, it's you can't say that I'm firing you, but we love you. No, those are two contradictory statements. So I guess from my perspective, Ray, what is the right way to target? Obviously, I think the signal that the government is sending to the market is around, the bond market is, hey, listen, we are going to downsize the deficits. So that way, hopefully the bond markets will come down, the treasury will potentially come down to reduce the cost of, goods and services. From your perspective, Ray, like, how should the government be looking at it?
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of business principles that are not being used. It's very selectively being chosen right now, what principles to be applied from business and what not to be applied, right? And so I would say there has been this bias towards making big splashes in the first, 90 days of presidency to have momentum. It's a kind of a PR move, but what this results in is less measured, less data driven, less analytical thinking, which is highly leveraged in business to be competitive. For you to actually succeed, you can't just ignore all the data in a competitive environment. And so hopefully maybe after the initial 90 days and they make a point and they somehow win public affection or whatever they're trying to do here with the PR game, even though it's Trump's last term and he doesn't need to think about re-election, right? But if he's trying to line it up for his party, hopefully they have some time where they can just actually get the numbers right? If they were serious and earnest about running this more efficiently. If you're trying to pay down the debt, right, there's a couple things there. One, which is it's not clear what is the right level of leverage that a state should be at. When you're young, you should be highly leveraged. You should have a lot of debt. That's what a lot of financial advisors suggest, is that you're not taking enough risk by not having enough debt. People tend to take on educational debt thinking they'll pay off later in life, right? So there's a case in which some amount of debt is not bad. It's prudent. Now, we're probably past that point. We probably have too much debt. So but what do? Do you increase your income or do you decrease your bottom line? And in order to understand that, probably you want to do both. And in order to do both, you want to look at where the fastest savings will come, and there is a question of where do you want to redistribute your efforts, right? So you can cut from the military. Why aren't we cutting from there? That's a huge part of the spend, right? So you're selectively, implicitly making an argument for what is the distribution of funds that we should have, or if you think about product portfolio, these are the different products that the U.S. government should be responsible for, and these are the ones that make us, if you want to apply a BCG framework, these are our cash cows, maybe the USPS, which is one of the few actually making a lot of money, although even due to recent legislation issues, they can't make a lot of money. They're going to be in a deficit anyway. But if you have more money-making mechanisms like that, you want to support them, you want to make them better, you want to work with them on how do you become more competitive against maybe the private sector, and instead of tearing them down, right? If the answer to you're not performing well is always to tear it down, then there's not unless you replace this with also a plan of and in 5 years or 10 years, these are the next biggest products of the U.S. government, or these are the next biggest revenue generating sources of the U.S. government. You don't have a growth plan, right? Any new CEO that joins a company comes in with a big ambitious growth plan, but all we have is just
while Ray works on the mic, Janoye, any thoughts you want to opine?
So
and also talk about
I think Raymond brings up some great points, but this is where politics meets business, right? And this is the world we live in today. I'm sorry, but it's the world we live in today. Politics.
I agree.
Fine, right? But you think about, Raymond mentioned the 90-day splash, right? I reflect back to 2020, Joe Biden elected, and first thing he said was, I'm going to get rid of student loans. Everybody was excited. The general public who had loans was generally excited. Executive order, if I remember correctly, vetoed, right? Executive power didn't happen, right? We had it go to the Supreme Court. It went through several states. There was some strong pushback to that because ultimately we, the taxpayers, would bear that cost, right? But now, on the flip side, executive order, right? We're now going through this process of right-sizing the government, and there seems to be more of a buy-in to that. Yes, people are losing their jobs. However, we don't see the same level of pushback that we once saw with the Biden administration within that 90-day splash. Once that momentum happens, the question becomes what is the true strategy here, right? I think to Raymond's point, this is Trump's last term, quote unquote, unless something changes. However, when we look at what else we need to do, what is the right thing for us to do to set us up for success as a country, and do we have the right people involved making decisions, right? And do we as a people feel like we are aligned with how our tax dollars, our hard-earned income, are we aligned with the government with how that's being spent? I think most Americans would say military defense spending, and I work in the defense industry, right? They say it's on par, right? Optically, we never want to give the illusion that it's going to back off of defense spending, right? We don't want to give that that confidence or instill confidence in some of the other powers that exist in the world, right? But what are the right things for us to be spending money on, and how are we positioned to that? Are we spending that money effectively, efficiently? So I do agree that this is probably a PR play, but this lends a better question to what is the future 6 months from now? Like, how does that get sustained?
Is Ray back?
Raymond,
Am I back? You guys hear
Yes,
me?
you are back.
You're back
I'm
now.
back. Okay.
Welcome back.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think even in the military, if we are providing free policing services to international waters, to trade routes, some people would say that we're providing them, or at least at a much cheaper cost to others than we could charge. Right. So if you're trying to increase your profitability of one of the biggest areas where you're investing as a government / business, you can probably eke more out of the money you're putting into your military, and you can charge others more for the service you're providing by being the global police force. We're not doing that. Right. So you could argue like that would be a vision, but I don't see anyone trying to sell me a vision. I'm like, this is the new way we're supposed to distribute our money, because this will get us to blah, blah, blah in 10 years. And that's what's good for our country. We have no vision, and no party has had a vision. It isn't just the Republicans. No one's really shown any vision to me as far as I can remember.
You all keep getting back to my point. Remember, that's exactly what I said of what's the vision here, and also how do you make sure this is even sustainable past the current administration. And Ray, I know Caleb, I'm sure you're jumping to jump in here. There's a lot. So, but I also want to put into context just the layoffs that we've talked about, and the layoffs that we've talked about, and how we're really accounting that as cost savings, or how that's really helping the debt. Because if you think about it, in the private sector, if you work for a company and they lay you off, let's say they give you a 3-month severance, and they say, bye-bye, you're officially off $5. In 4 months, if you don't get another job, that you're still off $1. 5 months, it takes you a year, you're still off $1. If you're an employee of the U.S. government making $70,000, 80,000, and quote unquote you get laid off, but it takes you, if you go 3, 4, 5 months and you can't get another job, and now you're collecting unemployment benefits, you're not paying income taxes, right? Now you're still on the books, right? In some way, you're still on the books. So is that truly a saving? So that's why, we also have to put into context why, business principle and layoffs in the private sector sometimes different from layoffs in the public sector, right? If I was an $80,000 employee paying taxes because I work for the U.S. government, I am contributing to the growth of the society. If I'm laid off, no income coming in, I'm also reducing my spending, which also impact the economic growth of the country anyways. So you don't completely get off the books in the same way you can in the private sector. So I also want to make sure that we're also framing the layoffs and the cost savings that we think we're going to achieve those areas as well.
No, honest, I think you'll make a good point. I think overall, every president have tried to do this. I think the last president who did it and achieved the balanced budget was Bill Clinton. And I was looking at it I was reading a Bill Clinton executive order that he gave out. Was it in 1993? Talked about the executive order it said reductions of 100,000 federal positions. So he did it, worked with our goal to execute that, and he achieved the balanced budget. Also, there was one that he also did. It's called the National Partnership for Reinventing the Government. We talked about the U.S. He said the National Partnership for Reinventing Government was a U.S. government reform initiative launched in 1993 by Vice President Al Gore. Its goal was to make the federal government work better, cost less, and get results the American people care about. So Bill Clinton did it. Also, there's one person that nobody talks about a lot. Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter introduced the zero-based budgeting into the government system. It was like, guys, we have to start with the zero and then allocate each amount to what we are spending, not just keep spending, because Congress appropriates the bill, sends it out to the OMB, and the OMB executes the money to all the agencies. And there's no controller to actually close the book. Like, I think I was listening to a podcast where Elon Musk and those guys were saying that, guys, there's no controller to actually close. They don't have a financial close process. So they don't know exactly where this money is going to. And that's what actually untangle, or I'll say USA with the cattle in the coal mine, which actually people were actually shocked about the amount of waste, fraud, and abuse happening in the agencies. So every government has done that. So lastly, Obama also did it as well. June 13th, 2011, executive order, delivering an efficient, effective, and accountable government. So every president have tried to do that. But I guess your question, so your question is, the vision is not really clear enough. I think the vision is simple. The vision is this: number one, how do we build a fortress America, or you call it the golden age of America? It's three things. Number one, and the first, blueprints are wrong. Okay, how do we provide a tax policy, which I think, I hope he does refines it and actually tax the rich, because if you're going to lower taxes, which I love as a middle class person, lowering taxes will in turn lower revenue just based on the math. But I'm hoping that if you can lower taxes for the middle class and the poor, but tax the rich, I'm all in for that, because listen, the rich have to pay their fair share. I think it's about high time. I believe in that philosophy. So that's the first thing. But the thing that will actually spur the economy is around regulations. How do we deregulate the economy? There's lots of regulations. And to build a house, the amount of work you have to go through and all the channels of communication, it's just a mess. So deregulate the government. And number three is around the energy. How do we unleash energy? I think all these three verticals can potentially help spur the economy. But number two, which nobody has talked about, is the external revenue service. I think it's high time that our allies start paying their fair share. India charges America 100% in tariffs, and we only charge them 2.5%. Canada, Justin Trudeau, talking a big game, the $300 billion in deficit in Canada alone. Mexico, the same. It's hard time that they pay. So that's why I love the reciprocal tariffs. That will bring in billions of dollars. Doing all this and right-sizing the government, that will lead. And all we need to do. At first, I thought that the Fed fund rate was the most important metric, but I think I was wrong. I think the most important metric is the bond market, the 10-year Treasury. Remember when Trump became president, the Treasury actually went up because they called us bluff. They were like, listen, you said they're going to lower taxes, but you're not going to do anything about the deficits. Well, we're going to go up. So until the team can show the bond market that, hey, we are actually serious about cutting spending, the bond market is actually proportional to mortgage rates. It's going to drive mortgage rates. So in conclusion, God is in the details. Defense spending is like less than 5% of the spend. We have to, all Americans have to look themselves in the mirror and say, guys, we need to go into entitlement. We need to take the bull by the horn. Medicare, Medicaid, maybe not
Social Security too?
No, Social Security. I think Social Security, if you pay your fair share, you need to have it. But the problem with Social Security is that back in 1945, there were 10 people funding Social Security. Now it's only 2 to 1. So we need to have more babies. We need to get more people into the workforce to fund Social Security. Well, we can fund it. But I think we need to tackle it. We need to slash. And also, in my opinion, listen, I'm from Ghana. I'm going to tell the audience, there is no free medical care. You have to take care of yourself. That we need to go back to eating right, taking care of ourselves. Because free again, unless I get it, people get cancer and all that stuff. But we need to go back to being healthy. Americans are not healthy anymore. We are the fattest nation in G7. It's fattest. I'm thinking about it. So we need to take off, go back to that, or else it will explode, and then we'll be in crisis like Greece and Italy. What happened to them?
But right to your point, but those are like the biggest, call it the biggest rocks that no one wants to touch.
No one wants to touch.
But so that's the point. And you've asked the question on the right side. Well, what's the impact of what's been going on here? Like, do we really see that being meaningful impact? Because I don't know about you all, but I think between now and the next 4 years, I do not expect us. I think we'll continue to spend more than we make. Right, or certainly, right, the government is going to continue to spend more than imposing, and I do not expect the deficit to be significantly impacted over the next 4 years. Right, we have the number right now, national debt at $36 billion. Come 4 years from now, do we really think that number is going to be much lower? Because I do not.
Yeah.
Do anybody here thinks it's going to be lower in 4 years?
What, the deficit is going to be lower?
Yeah. Do you think the national deficit will be lower? We are 36 billion today. In 4 years, where do we think we stand? And then I know we got to jump on 36 trillion. Trillion, not billion. Trillion.
It would be marginal at best. I mean, honestly, I just feel like we're kicking the can down the road and just putting, we're kind of just, putting a face on something that's already ugly.
Right.
That's the best way I can put it. But I don't, it's going to be interesting to see, Caleb mentioned the tariffs. I know there's a lot of, mixed feelings about that. I'm personally wondering, I know we want to talk about consumers, but like how does that affect the consumer market? Like if you think about it, right, if I simplify the equation, we got rid of how many federal jobs? People are without jobs, right? Mm-hmm. We're going to continue to have people without jobs. We're going to now, what I believe is we're going to go into this inflationary period because we are now putting tariffs on goods and services goods coming from other countries, right? And now, I mean, we're in it doesn't feel like we're moving much in the direction of reducing the deficit. I just don't feel like that's something that we are moving or progressing towards. It feels more like we are kicking the can down the road, and if anything, I think we'll see some marginal benefit. I don't think it's going to be decreased by much. My personal opinion.
Yeah, certainly right. It's too early to tell.
I mean, for the idea of tariffs causing inflation, for me, I think it's still TBD, in the sense that when Trump put on those tariffs on China, inflation was very low. Trump left with 1.8 in inflation. That's number one. Also, number two, think about it. I think when Trump put on 25% on car, like on
aluminum and steel, you're talking about?
Steel, yeah, something. The other countries lowered their tariffs back on us. So it's a negative because listen, America is a consumer nation. Yeah. And in order for you to grow your economy, you need to get access into the United States government. So if you're trying to play, you have to play ball with us. And the ball is, if you do, like for example, India, we say we're going to tax Indian 100% tariffs. Modi, it will be wise enough to reduce the amount of tariff tax to about, let's say, 45%. By dropping that alone, that will reduce inflation. So that's how I'm looking at it from the inflation standpoint. And inflation is not really caused by tariffs. It's caused by wasteful government spending. Remember, during the pre-pandemic, we printed how many? Close to $5 trillion of money, free money. Remember, we were getting those checks. That's what spurred the inflation. It wasn't spurred by how do you call it, tariffs. So it's still to be determined. So moving on to the transitioning that to housing market today. Again, I always thought that the Fed funds rate was the most important metric, but actually I think I lied. I was misinformed. I think 10-year Treasury is actually highly correlated to mortgage rates. And I'm going to pull up here.
Yeah, of course.
And there were some articles that came out yesterday, this week, Fannie Mae. It says that higher mortgage rates likely to keep existing home sales near multi-decade lows. And I'll just read a quick snippet. It said, the recent jump in 10-year Treasury yield and resulting rise in mortgage rate are expected to continue to weigh on the existing home sales in the near future, likely keeping them at or near lowest level since 1995, which is crazy to me. And the other article that I think I shared with the team was around builder confidence falls of the tariff and housing cost concerns. It said builder sentiment fell sharply in February over concerns on tariffs, elevated mortgage rates, and higher housing costs as well. It said while builders hold out hope for pro-development policies, particularly for regulatory reform, policy uncertainties and cost factors created a reset for 2025 expectations and one other stuff. So the question is now a good time to buy? Or should we be advising people like, listen, given where the market is right now, there's so many things going on, we have to figure out our debt issue, and we think potential tariff impact that cause inflation. Like, do we say, listen, hold on a second, let's see how the market shakes out in the next 3 to 6 months. If Congress is able to come with a bill that makes sense, and things stabilize, then you can get into the market. Or should people be greedy when others are fearful? Toyyib, I'll pass the ball to you since you know.
Perfect. Let me take this. Especially I think we touched on this topic slightly maybe last year, and especially home buying, personal home buying is always based on your personal finances, right? Like I have friends who are buying homes, some people are staying on the sidelines. How confident do you feel about your financial situation? And then you make that decision. Yeah. But, there's no doubt that I think consumer confidence, sentiment and confidence overall is shaky a little bit, right? We're seeing, obviously the recent CPI number, once again, year over year at 3% over the 2% target. The war on inflation is now over year. Mortgage rates at 6.5%, 7%. Which I'm calling, by the way, the new norm. I really do think this 6 to 7% interest rates has become the new baseline and where we all have to get adjusted to. But so there's a lot of, to your point, there's a lot of uncertainty in the market overall. And the consumers are seeing news of layoffs, right? You're seeing government layoffs. You're seeing layoffs in the private sector. It's, how confident do I feel making what tends to be the largest purchase, right, of your life, which is really a home? How confident do I feel to go buy a house right now? So most people will sit on the sideline, but I don't know if the uncertainty might be for another, call it a full year, maybe even a year and a half. I'm not sure we're fully through this war on inflation. And even if you look at the existing home sales, most of the people are just staying put overall. Like if you have a great home, if you have a good home, but maybe it's not ideal what you want, most people are just deciding not to put their homes on the market anyways. Some of the homes that's on the market right now are homes either you have to sell, right? Or you're in position to sell and you really have to sell, or you're just making a lot of money and you do not care about the consequences. But the middle of that is folks just deciding to stay put and not doing anything at all. So look at your financial situation to determine, but 6 to 7% interest rates might be the norm. The war on inflation is not over. The uncertainty is here. Call it another year and a half minimum is what I'm seeing.
Interesting.
I got
what are your thoughts on that? With CPI being hot.
Yeah, Ray would love to hear your thoughts on this. But does any of this change? I know there's kind of like this thought that the Doge might be paying out dividends from some of the.
Oh yeah, we didn't talk about that.
So like we're talking about maybe going back into a hyperinflation period where spending is going to go up. But if the Trump administration decides to take some of that cost savings, I think quoted 20% of the cost savings and give it back to the American people, does that change the trajectory of do we have a repeat of about 2021, 2022 within the market, especially in the housing market?
I don't think so. Why say that? Because we are not printing money. What happened in 2020? We had to literally go into the bond market and print $5 trillion. This is pretty much waste, fraud, and abuse that is going to agencies to do. I don't want to go into that, but you know what I'm trying to say. So they are basically going to each agency and trying to actually reallocate the financial the money that's they're trying to reallocate the money that has already been appropriated, instead of this money going into a potential DEI initiative or whatever initiative happening that most Americans might disagree with. They were like, no, let's give this money to the American people. So I don't think that would drive inflation. Now, again, there are two things that I'm thinking about. There are two. The first thing is that from a political perspective, that would be a huge win. Because remember, people always say that, Trump came back because Trump's the one who gave us, the COVID checks. Everybody can talk about the COVID checks. So if they want to win in 2026 midterms, that would be a strategic political move for them to make. However, I think the right thing for them to do is pay their debt off. Use that money to hit, the debt, so the economy, to send a signal to the bond market that, or to the 10-year treasury that, hey, listen, we're actually serious about doing that. And by doing that, the 10-year treasury falls. If that falls, that will affect the mortgage prices to come down to, let's say 4.5% or whatever. Now 10-year treasury, 10-year treasury is like 4.5. Right. Potentially come down to 3. If they come down to 3 and we achieve a GDP growth of 3% and oil growth of 3%, that's golden age right there. That is where. So that's what I'm looking at. I don't think that will spur spur inflation. But Toyyib probably disagree with me. So.
Ray, do you want to? Let me just be direct.
Yeah.
Ray, I could quickly just. First of all, there's no checks coming. I believe this is just politics, PR, Brandon. There's no checks. You send checks when you have surplus. They're still printing money. Inflation is still a problem. I do not feel all that war is over. And once again, and I keep saying that, and even if you read through all these articles, like the actual hard cost savings is TBD. We do not actually know. Yes, money was allocated here. Like how much of that 1 trillion has actually been collected, money available to actually send down? TBD, no one really knows. I think it is, you had talked about like the first 90 days of an executive coming in, trying to make a big splash. That's how I see it. If folks think they're getting COVID checks, refund checks like they did 4 years ago, I do not see that happening at all. So that's where I stand. Right?
I can be either way on it. I can see them doing it even when we're not in a surplus, just to be a political move. I mean, they've made plenty of other moves that are not economically the wisest choice either, just to make a statement, right? So I can see them doing that just to say they did it, and even though it was probably not financially wise, according to Caleb. So I probably wouldn't want so much a check as like if we're going to give back to people, then you should do it right. You should either just reduce their taxes to give back to people, or you can just give people universal basic income. But you need a full-on plan on what that means and like how that's going to help, and roll that out in a good way, not just like a one and done kind of check. But in terms of housing, whether or not to buy here, I do think home sales continue to decline. It declined in January to 4.08 million instead of 4.29, and that might continue to happen. And I don't think it's just the interest rates. I think it is about the uncertainty in not only the economy but the political situation in America. Maybe after these 90 days, after the initial big moves, then things can simmer down and people can feel a little more steady. And the people who recently just got all the layoffs, they'll find their footing again, and they'll have more stability in their own lives. But right now, however, and also with the lack of fertility, as Caleb says, in the long term, you're going to have less and less individual buyers, right? So on the demand side, you may say that more institutional people are just going to keep rolling up properties. So I actually don't quite know. I don't know if I would say because of our fertility crisis, we're going to have increasing power to the buyers because of lack of demand. But probably there's either going to be consolidation of the housing market. More and more of the people buying are just going to be large roll up businesses, kind of like what you guys are trying to do. Where you guys are buying a bunch of apartment buildings. And the individuals will continue to be less and less of the share of the pie of homeowners and people who buy houses, whether they want to or not. I don't know exactly what to do with that information, but in terms of whether or not to buy, I guess you should start now. The traditional advice I've always heard in real estate is just always buy now, whether it's up or down. The sooner you buy, the sooner you're paying off everything, and you can snowball earlier on, right? It's all about building the snowball and leveraging the debt of buying real estate, because Warren Buffett didn't make most of his money until after he was 65. So if you think about a long life, you got to think about that compound interest and that compound return.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. I think for me, I'll probably tell them to stay on the sidelines. And this is me, who is a huge advocate of people owning their homes, but I'm also a huge advocate of renting where you want to live and own what you rent out. Meaning that buy real estate investment properties, but wherever you live, you rent that place. So I think that's my philosophy around that. But with respect to whether they need to buy a home today, I think overall I would say they should stay on the sidelines. Why should they stay on the sidelines? There's roughly about $10 trillion of debt that has to be refinanced in the next 3 to 6 months. That is number one. Number two, during the pandemic, the role of the Treasury Secretary is to do what? Is to manage the U.S. debt issuance, is to determine the mix of loans, short-term maturity, long-term maturities. And what happened during the pandemic? Most of the loans were borrowed for short-term. Janet Yellen, who I truly respect, borrowed those loans, and most of those loans are coming due. I'm not sure why I did it because at that time, remember, interest was super low. So you lock it in at least 10 years, 30 years, but he did a 2-year treasury. So March 14th is going to be very interesting because obviously, if you don't fund the government shuts down, and there's talks about the government shutting down. And there's so many things that Scott Benson and the Treasury team have to figure out. How do we refinance the debt? So my thing is that stay on the sideline because, again, mortgage rates, I don't see it coming down unless the Doge team, unless the government shows to the public that, hey, we're actually serious about getting this. It's going to be painful, but it has to be done. And also, number two, I do not believe that there's a supply problem. You keep talking about supply problems or tariff will affect the cost of raw materials, the rebars, the concrete. We are in a financial problem. That is the key here. And until we do something about it, the bond market is going to keep going higher, and people will not be able to afford the mortgage that will come out. So you can lower the price from, let's say, I think the median average home today in Texas is around, is it 350 or 400,000?
Yeah, 350-ish. Yeah.
If let's say it comes down to $200,000 and you're still paying 8%. It still doesn't. The math doesn't math out. You cannot make. So I think that's why this is very, very, especially the first year, is very, very important. That it's going to be painful, but I think at the other side there will be success. Short-term pleasure for long-term pain. But short-term pain, there'll be short-term pain. I know it's coming. That's why I'm not investing in the stock market. I stopped it last month because, like yesterday or whatever, potential COVID that they found in Wuhan lab. They better shut all travels coming from. So it's like there's so many disruptions happening. Also, the Ukraine, Russia thing, they have to figure it out. So for me, I'm like, if I'm Ben, don't go into the market right now. Wait until after the 90 days. Wait until maybe June, July to see how the market shakes out before you get into the market. So that's just my 2 cents on it. Any feedback? Battle?
I gotta get going, Caleb.
Yeah. No,
but my last comment on that is where there's chaos, there's opportunity, right? Where everyone else is hesitant. If you're bold and you have a particular, investment thesis, for particular places. I think last time I was on, I talked a little bit about particular areas of real estate, maybe close to the build out of new, like Stargate or all these new data centers, maybe, right? Or near infrastructure build out that you think that you see the government participating in. So I think there are some pockets that you could invest in. Right. And I agree 100% with Caleb, rent where you're staying for lifestyle reasons. Right. But then treat real estate buying as an investment, not so much because there's the old way of thinking that my mom and everyone's generations, you got to buy a house to stay stable and safe. You're not going to be safe just because you own a house. There's no safety there. It's really just think about money. And how you're going to get a return on that real estate investment. And because I wouldn't want to buy a house for where I live and think I'm going to stay there forever with how much volatility there is in the world. Right. I want some flexibility in my geopolitical environment, right? And so if I think that I'm going to move, eventually every 5 years or something anyway, then why don't I just, rent and then have a more stable property that I own elsewhere instead of doing the whole buying and selling kind of thing, unless I'm increasing the property value myself. Something to think about, but that's a lot of work.
Great insights. And thanks, Ray, for joining. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the podcast. Bye-bye.
Yes, we do. Bye.
So to that point, Caleb, Toyyib, as the real estate gurus that you are, right?
Yeah.
What if I don't want to stay on the sideline? What if I want to jump in the game? What if I want to play? What advice do you have? What properties should someone who wants to jump in the game and be a little bit more aggressive? We hear about these different types of real estate investments, for example, auxiliary homes or ADUs are becoming popular on the West Coast. What type of investment properties would you suggest, or properties in general from a real estate standpoint?
I'm gonna go I could go first. I'll say where the opportunities, and Caleb touched on something, which is just loan maturities coming due. In the commercial multifamily real estate space, we're seeing that as well, right? Which is, loans, people who borrowed on floating rates, people who have short-term loans, those loans are maturing. In fact, they were supposed to mature last year, and we thought, we'll see some crisis, but it turns out the banks were willing to extend some of these low maturity dates. So they give you a 90-day extension, a year out. So we're thinking some of that is coming due this year. So that might be where the opportunity is. Unfortunately, is who are the homeowners, buyers, or sellers who've over-levered, who are now having to get out of their property because they ran out of cash or the loan maturity is up. That is where I think the number one set of opportunity lies today. Two is also on the builder space. Which is, hey, on the builder space, people who've already committed, hey, you started construction, especially on these large multifamily projects, you started construction mid-22s, market condition has changed, you're trying to offload that property now, and you might have to take a loss on it because, hey, you thought it would be worth 20 million, market condition says right now you're lucky if you could get 13. Right? Those are folks who are, hey, if I'm able to go in on some of these larger deals, $13 million property, and have enough cash to sustain the uncertainty that's happening over the next 2 years. Because I think that's the other part is you have to also go into some of these plays being able to withstand uncertainty for the next 2 to 3 years. Because I'm not sure how quickly we get on the other side. So if you're thinking about, oh yeah, maybe ADU or working with a developer that you might have a relationship with, do I have enough capital to take advantage of the opportunity now, but also withstand enough capital to withstand potential storms over the next 3 years? And that's how I think about it. I think that's how Caleb thinks about it as well, as where are the relationships that we have that we can leverage, while still strong fundamentals. So population growth, job growth, desirable neighborhoods, and then enough cash and capital reserve to withhold, or what's the word I'm looking for? But you get it, just being able to buy through the storms for the next 3 years. I think that's where the opportunity lies.
No, I think Toyyib said it really well. And for those looking to buy a single family home, like for those who are looking to buy, I think on the day before you buy a single family home, I'll probably do the analysis to figure out the cost of rent in that neighborhood. If that cost of rent in that neighborhood is less than your mortgage payment, I would say you rent. I mean, this simple math. Do the math, figure out, hey, I'll love to live in this neighborhood or this school district, or because it's a great place for me to raise my family. You just do the math and figure out, hey, is the rent payment in this neighborhood more than the mortgage payment? If it's more, then you obviously buy, but if it's less, you definitely have to rent. So that's the quick two snippets I want to add to those who want to make the payment.
It's an interesting thought, though, right? Because the rental market is also going to be, a challenging market as well, right? Renters.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
And because of the interest rates, the new norm, right? The 7%, 8%, whatever the percentage is in that middle of the pack. In terms of overall interest rates, like how do you then ensure you're in a position when you have a challenging rental market as well as a challenging position to finance or purchase a home, right? And to your point, Caleb, if you have an existing property, you need to get out of it. I think Toyyib made this statement earlier. What are you looking at? What are the variables you're looking at to sell that property in a tough environment like this, or rent it out as well?
But I think one of the other things that I think about, and Caleb, you just mentioned that you're sitting out on the stock market, and that's fine. But Ray mentioned something like wherever there's chaos, there's opportunities. Yeah. And if we all go back, and the storms inevitably pass. How do I make sure I'm in a position to be on the other side? Is how I think about it. Mm-hmm. And even in the stock market, you're right. We're seeing volatility right now. But I believe 5 years from now, the great companies will still be there, right? Because you're betting on the fundamentals, hey, the market that they're in, the strategic or competitive advantage that they have, and to say, hey, I'm here to bet that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, these list companies are going to be there. That's how I also think about real estate, right? Hey, is the fundamentals strong? Do we have population growth in the neighborhood, in the area that I'm looking to invest? Is the location prime? Is there, it's right off the exit on the highway. There are great shops. You say Starbucks, some of these other. Is the fundamentals strong? Is this neighborhood thriving? Now, interest rates at 7%. What does that look like? If I underwrite at 7%, maybe my returns are not spectacular, but what is also my investment hold period. So if you're looking to get into something for the next 2 years, flip it, make quick money, maybe real estate is not the play. You might go bet your money on Bitcoin and Doge. But if you're, hey, 10 years, I see this as a 10, 12, 15-year investment play. I still believe long-term real estate is going to be strong. Now, the next 3 years, maybe not as much, but I think if you're able to get into something great right now, you in 10 years from now, you come out looking like a genius. But when you were buying it, it was a lot of uncertainty that you just had to withstand, and no one wanted to compete with you. But then 10 years later, you look smart because you bet on the underlying fundamentals.
Yeah. Well, speaking about something that is not so great, obviously, the NBA is experiencing a viewership crisis, to say the least. There's an article in Front Office Poll that said NBA TV ratings are down 5%. It said the NBA's national TV viewership is down 5% year over year entering the second half of the season. But rating on ESPN platform are flat compared to last year. So Janoye is definitely a basketball and sports junkie. So we yield the floor to Janoye.
Yeah.
Like, what the heck is going on, man? Like, why is it boring to watch the NBA now? Is it because share some insights for us.
Oh, Janoye's on mute.
I think you're on mute, Janoye.
Yeah. The product has changed. I mean, that's the best way I can put it. The NBA, the product has changed. The way the game is played is vastly different now. And quite frankly, I mean, a lot of people are bored. I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, this is, February, I look forward to the All-Star game. I used to, right? Over the last 3 years, I'm like, okay. I didn't even watch any. I mean, I watched a little bit of the All-Star game itself, but, the dunk contest, like, the superstars don't want to participate anymore. It's just a different feel to it. And then what's even worse is you have players that are criticizing the game. Like, I've never seen that before. Like, Draymond Green has gone out and said this product sucks. You know what I mean?
Right.
He's currently playing in the NBA. Like, he's currently, bashing his brand. I think, and when you think about, there's a lot of, contracts coming up, viewership contracts, publishing contracts coming up. I know the TNT crew, they weren't able to renew the contract with the NBA. That's a big money. A lot of people watch inside the NBA on TNT. I'm a big fan of it, but ultimately, it really comes down to, like, we've got to get back to what we know basketball to be. 3-pointers and dunks. It's just not going to do it. I don't even know if players are really dunking like that anymore, right? But 3-pointers, like, I saw the other day, I heard a commentator say, the Celtics average 53s a game. 53s.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. 53s a game. That's their average.
Yeah.
I mean, you're literally just watching players run up and down the court and shoot threes. So the product has definitely changed. I think for viewership to go back up, we've got to get our NBA superstars to embrace the product again, participate in the things that make fans excited to watch the game. And I think you got to have, you've got to develop the culture to be a little bit different than 53s a game. The game has to be played for what we know it to be. And I get it. We can point the fingers at a few NBA players, but ultimately that's what it comes down to.
So how do we revive
the NBA?
Any
Yeah,
ideas?
so first of all, let me just say, all the attacks on the 3-point shooting, I'm not sure I fully agree. When Steph is lighting up the court like he did at the Olympics, if you all remember, it was one of the greatest moments. I was in my living room screaming, and I couldn't be more excited to see each of those shots. But I agree with everything, Janoye, that you're mentioning there. One of the things that I'll say for me on my end, because to your point, I'm a huge basketball fan, love the game, grew up on it. We all did. Growing up, my favorite player was Vince Carter. Man, I love Vince Carter. That was my guy. But I think where we are now and where I see my interest actually dip a little bit is the lack of strong storylines. like the NBA had done a great job of being able to promote its superstars, its brands, to be able to evoke such strong emotions. I remember when LeBron joined Miami Heat, like you had such strong feelings. You either wanted them to succeed, you wanted them to fail, but you was tuning in every night just to follow the storylines. When Kevin Durant joined the Warriors, like you had this big behemoth, there was the favorite, and it gave you something to root for or root against. Right now, I feel like when I look at the game, the superstars who are truly superstars, they are not really on great contending teams. So there's not this one big heavy favorite loaded with superstars that gave you like, oh man, yes, I can't wait to go watch the Golden State Warriors with Steph, and they're the prohibitive favorite. They're going to bring it every night, and we can see them winning the championship. LeBron is amazing and what he's doing, but we don't think that team, like who really thinks that team is, the heavy favorite to go win the championship? The Celtics are great, but the truth is there's two superstars that are not on the Steph Curry, Kevin Durant. They don't have that level of, call it brand recognition globally the way like a Kobe did, a LeBron did. So the teams are really good, but nobody's really great in my point of view that's really standing out that has a superstar that makes you want to root. So at the end of the day, you tune in when it's on, but there's not been a compelling reason to tune in every night. Now, recently, in the middle of the night, the Lakers stole Luka from the Mavericks and, broke all of our hearts down here in Dallas. And now I have to root as a Laker fan moving forward. But maybe that's going to give us the energy and the storyline because, Janoye, move over, okay? I'm getting my Lakers jersey. Maybe that gives us a storyline of LeBron and Luka being really great. That could give us something to root for. But right now, I think the storylines are super weak and the superstars are not contending at the same level that historically we've seen them do.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And just to add some footnotes to the theme around storyline, I think we've lost it because the players have been too buddy. Like back in the 80s, like how do you call it? The Bad Boys Pistons. You had Bill Laimbeer, Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars. Like, they were there to kill your ass. Like, they were like, listen, we're here to fight. Like, either we win on the court or see me. Like, they were very, because it's part of the game. They get it that it's all part of the game. Michael Jordan talking trash to other opponents. You have a Kobe Bryant, like, willing to cut your neck off. Now, like, I'm not seeing that. Like, I'm not seeing the passion and the why. Because, bro, you guys are all multi-millionaires, so you obviously pay for the money. But there has to be a why as to why you are doing. Are you doing this because I'm not seeing that, like the storyline, like, because you went to a game, Michael Jordan's game. I mean, I wasn't there, but the stories that I've read, that Michael Jordan, like, listen, he hated this guy. Like, listen, I fucking hate you. I'm going to kill you. Like,
I'm going to put on a show.
I'm not seeing that, that happened in 2016 when, LeBron James and the comeback, LeBron James and Steph Curry were joining each other.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing that, and so I think they need to have that, the player, and I think it's probably part of the rules and regulations that have been imposed. If you touch them, foul. You sneeze, foul. You pass gas, foul. Bro, like, let them play. Like, what do you do? You touch. So they need to deregulate the rules. Like that's like a term to use.
At the superstar level, and to your point, like we want the superstar, like the superstar, to like compete and show that level of, man, it's me against you at the highest level on the biggest stage.
Right.
Yeah, so I agree.
So
I agree. We want to see that.
Yeah. So one of the thing, and the viral moment that went out this weekend was what the Canadians and Americans booing our American club.
Yeah.
Trump, talking trash to Trudeau. You need those kind of stories to make it exciting, because that's that was the third time I actually want to that I watched the game from end to end. And because I haven't been clear until so. We need this kind of story, viral moment, like what is really happening to compel people to watch, or else like the same shit.
People are not gonna turn in.
Basketball 3-pointers is the same thing. Like there's nothing exciting to watch.
The storyline has to be strong, right? Like, hey, to your point, and you made a great point there of, hey, when there's a storyline, whether it's, we're going for something beyond just a game. And I talk about it when I was watching Steph and LeBron and Kevin Durant on the Olympics against France and at the biggest, like, global, that's what we wanted to see. We wanted to see you show up and show that, hey, I guess I make a lot of money, but man, I'm passionate about this game. I would do it for free, and I'm doing it at the biggest stage. And you're right. Right now, Yeah, we might show up, put up points, but
same
hey,
thing.
who's really out there? Like, who's, Janoye's favorite player? Who's the Kobe? Like, who's going out there to let you know? Westbrook, Russell Westbrook played that way, but obviously he's past his prime. Steph is that way, but I don't think the team is going to be a top contender. Now, with Jimmy Butler, maybe that gives us, maybe that gives us something, but yeah, where's the rivalries?
It's okay. It's a sports game. Outside of the game, but in the game, they have to be able to join each other. Like, listen, I'm here. Like the KG, so remember the Celtics in Miami?
Yeah.
They hated each other. Like,
we wanted to see.
But it's part of the game,
That's the thing, too, right? I think one of the greatest assets to the NBA is the playoffs. I mean, it's a 7-game series, right? And you have to prove it. You have to win 4 times to move on to the next round. And that in itself is a story, right? It's a proven story. Like, who won this year? We can all talk through it. People can reference back to playoffs back from the 80s, right? The regular season has changed. The regular season, no one cares about the regular season anymore. And that's changed slowly but surely. We've seen Kawhi Leonard sit out games. We've seen LeBron James sit out games. We've seen NBA superstars sit out games in the regular season. Right? They're not hurt. That if they are hurt, it's a little puny injury, right? We'll see. But to your point, back in the early 2000s, Allen Iverson played every game. Hurt, Kobe played every game.
People wanted to show up.
Took pride in playing 82 games a season, right? And then you got someone like LeBron. I'm not trying to poke on LeBron here, but at the All-Star game, hours before the game,
sit up. Yeah,
I'm going to sit out. Think about how many disappointed fans. Disappointments happen after disappointment.
To see that.
These superstars do that. And not to mention, when you think about the next wave of superstars, I really love Anthony Edwards. I think he has charisma.
Yeah, he's going to bring it.
He has the talent to be an NBA, but he has a poor example in front of him. Because
come to the other guys just hate. It is what it is.
Who's going to give it to him? And he doesn't even want it. He doesn't even want to be the face of the NBA because that's not a thing that anyone wants anymore. Before, everyone's fighting for that top dog. I remember Trace McGrady, Vince Carter, Kobe Bryant. There was one point in time when we saw those people play, we took pride in that. That was a thing that, hey, how many points? We don't even talk like that anymore. So I think, the NBA season, I know there's a lot of controversy around, the length of the season if it's too long.
Maybe we shut it down a little bit.
They try to do the in-season tournament to kind of spice things up again. That doesn't really, I don't know how that's really working, right? I just don't know if the season as a product still works for the NBA.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting how, this, I'm not sure if this is the Trump effect as well, because a lot of people are now paying attention to things they care about. But I also think that maybe it's the death of the legacy media as well, because yes, TNT and those legacy media, now everybody's on Facebook, everybody's on Twitter and X, Prime Video. So maybe they have to change their distribution channels to those platforms. Maybe
that's what the NBA has done.
Increase the ratings, for that, but it's going to be interesting. But man, it's definitely a pleasure having you, Janoye, and Raymond left for those who joined later to the podcast. Really appreciate you guys, and we would like to say a big thank you to our guests for joining the show today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, at Wealth Wave Podcast, our goal is to entertain and inspire you guys to take action. So please like and subscribe if you haven't. It's right in the bottom. Like and subscribe to this pod and share with your friends as well as we bring you more content for you. So with that, we say thank you, Toyyib, for joining, and Janoye, again, thanks a lot, and we'll see you in the next pod.
Thank you, my guy.
Yeah, thank you for having me.